I'd say that if education is only about information processing, then the human element's going to be lost very quickly.
Welcome in the Nivels podcast. In this episode, Aziza Mayo and Janja Pubeck explore the work of the American educator Sam Crowell.
The human role in the world and within nature, we have constructed systems that define our institutions, that define many of the processes that we use, that define our economics, as if the world and ourselves are machines.
Sam Crowell invites us to see education as a soulful and meaningful practice, one rooted in wonder, connection, and the unpredictable nature of learning.
Allowing ourselves to remove this machine metaphor out of our worldview is essential to making something different happen in education.
What does it mean to be truly present as a teacher? How can we shape education as a process of becoming, of human formation?
We rarely remember all the content that a teacher gives to us, but we do remember the teacher.
And what does this ask of us in an age of standardization and accelerating technologies? Sam, welcome in the Nivels podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
The listeners maybe didn't read your book, maybe heard your name. So can you introduce yourself? And you also been a teacher for a long time. So maybe can you introduce yourself by what kind of teacher you are?
Well, let's see. I could do that in terms of titles or something of that sort. I am a professor emeritus from a state university, California. And one of the things that I've always tried to do as a teacher, if I introduce myself as a teacher, is to approach it as applied philosophy, wanting to see if ideas that were important to me could come to life in the classroom and with whatever kinds of students I was working with. So I've worked with special education students who had a lot of different challenges in their lives. I've worked with primary school students who were 11 and 12 years old. I've worked with high school students, we call them high school or secondary students, who were 16, 17 years old. So in various subjects. And I've also directed programs in elementary education at a liberal arts university in the United States. And I've also directed programs in educational administration, training principals and leaders in various things. So my background is as a teacher. I led a federal program, an agency that worked with students who did not have opportunities and to bring them through the educational system so they could actually eventually become teachers themselves. And I was a principal of 3 schools before entering the university. And finally, the kind of teacher I am still trying to be is one who is holistic, who tries to use education to look at a different kind of society, a better society, one that is open to our humanity and brings forth possibility in our lives. So that's what really motivates me. And I created a master's program in holistic and integrative education in a state university that tended to be very successful. Our students did very well and went on for doctoral programs and Fulbright scholarships and a number of real awards. So I feel honored to have been a part of their lives.
So that's what you all did, and also there's a lot of intention in it. But what is the essence of your teacher? Yeah, how do you say magic? What do you do?
I don't know that I have magic. I think what I instruct anybody in teaching is the greatest gift that you have is who you are, and to bring who you are into every teaching situation as honestly and authentically as you can, and not separate it out as some machine or someone without a soul.
Aziza, you met Sam by conference at the Earth Charter, and just before we went into the podcast, you said this is what brought Nivos together for you, Sam. So can you maybe explain why you have this special look in your eyes right now? You're really happy. What is the essence of the connection with the work of Sam?
I guess the core of it is that you bring together concepts, understandings, and wisdom in a way that creates a whole rather than a fragmented experience, understanding, or living in a way. And for me, bringing it together, tying it together, creating the connectedness between everything is what sort of roots me in the world and in life and in my thinking. I just realized just now this morning when we were working together that it's been 10 years when we first met. We met at a session or a teaching course that was called Education of the Heart. And that was the place where I met Nicole from Nivos as well. And we sort of started building up a relationship in that. But I just realized in being immersed in your teaching today that how much you have sort of offered me a direction to develop my thinking and my understanding of what education can be like and what living in the world and being in the world can be like. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Aziza.
Yeah, you use a word. We worked with you this morning, and the word emergence is important, and you were talking about emergent teaching. Can you maybe explain to the listener what you mean? It's a big word, but what is the essence of this concept, emergent teaching?
It is a big word. Essentially, when you look at the world as whole, as not fragmented, but as always in the process of becoming, then what's underneath that is a flux, a movement, a dynamism that is unpredictable. It's not linear. It can move in many, many different directions all at once. And when I take this concept of the way nature creates itself and try to apply it to learning situations in the classroom, then I have to be at a different place in order to watch and guide and give direction to what happens in that space when people come together, learners come together, and they start to really engage in what they're interested in. They start to imagine and they start to create. Then all I can do is just remain present in that space and guide them, help them, watch them, encourage them, support them. That is a very different place to be than giving a presentation or a lecture. It's, I have to be in relationship. And if I give a lecture, I don't have to be in relationship. I don't have to care about those in front of me. But in this space, I do. In this space, we're co-creating something together, and some kind of magic happens. And it's always surprising. It's always a little unpredictable, but it's powerful, and it changes lives. It is what changes lives.
And we started with what you taught, a new word for me, what I really like is embodied learning. We did exercises to really feel our body and to get in contact. When I think at the Dutch education, it's most of the time about the thinking, it's about math, about language, and it's about goals, and it's linear. So how do you reflect on the world right now, and what do we have to do in education to get humanity more in the middle?
I think we begin by perhaps bringing into question the fundamental assumptions and the way we see the human role in the world and within nature. We have constructed systems that define our institutions, that define many of the processes that we use, that define our economics, and many other aspects of our lives, as if the world and ourselves are machines, and that they operate as a machine would, as if the universe is a machine. And that thinking is so outdated from what we know in science. From what we know in science, the world is anything but a machine. It's self-creative. It's moving and dynamic and charged with energy and possibility. And when we see nature creating itself, when we see humans interacting and relating in special ways, that's not a machine. So that allowing ourselves to remove this machine metaphor out of our worldview is essential to making something different happen in education. When to do that, it's not just a matter of intellectualizing it. That's, at first I wanted to intellectualize this and say, look, this doesn't follow. And, but that just is another nice little packaged lecture doing the same thing. And then I've tried to have lessons and presentations and assignments that emphasize that. I was falling into the same trap. Here it is. I'm just being a machine with other content. So now, I said, well, the only way to really shift our perspective is to experience it in a different way. And maybe in experiencing ourselves as not machines, but as living organisms, dynamic and moving and creative, that we start to inhabit that space and that body. And so that increasingly has been the approach I've tried to take. I'd like to add that that doesn't remove intellect. It doesn't remove content, and it doesn't remove information. It just puts it in a different place and with a different priority.
You mentioned you need to bring yourself as an educator into that place in a different way than when we have the mechanical or the linear thinking. And how do you bring yourself into that place? Because you told us you sort of took us through your exploration in that, from the more thinking, the cognitive oriented, the analytical thinking, towards the embodied way. But it's quite a long journey, I imagine. How do we prepare young teachers or new teachers to sort of find their place in their way?
Oh, that's such a good question. One of the first questions I start with in a course is an insight that someone gave me years and years ago, a thinker named Ashley Montague. Brilliant and wise man. He said, we rarely remember all the content that a teacher gives to us, but we do remember the teacher. And that really hit me. So who are we? We bring who we are into the classroom. And I raise the question, who are we? Who are we in this world, and what do we want to bring to the lives of others? In values, in the way that we interact, in the future that we help them create. And so with teachers, part of it is self-discovery, being in alignment with who you are, discovering who you are in the midst of all of this world and change. So there are activities that sort of pull those into question, that are fun to explore and really open up a number of aspects of our personalities and our emotions and our world. But it's also having them experience it. So if I can help them experience life in a different way and understand themselves in relation to that, it starts to break through.
Can you maybe give us an example of how you worked on that in your practice?
I will share one kind of assignment. Let me give you an assignment that I used with new teachers who were very interested in giving that first lesson. Of course, we did micro teaching and micro lessons for them and with them. But this particular assignment said that I would like for you to teach a lesson without using any words at all, just the senses and the feelings, and go as deeply as you can. You can create groups and all kinds of things, but you can't have words, you can't give written directions, except maybe a word or two. And I had them work in groups to design lessons with that in mind. It was amazing. The fun that they had doing it, the fear that they had putting these together, but realizing that they could use the body, the senses, the smells, the colors, images, all to create an experience sometimes for others to get the idea, get the concept. And so that's one of them, to bring stories to life, to create stories around the content that would embed the content within an imaginary experience. So these are things that were creative, but were problematic. They were not easy to do, and yet it took them out of the mode of creating a 1, 2, 3 kind of lesson plan. It didn't remove that. They could still do a 1, 2, 3 kind of lesson plan, but there were other things happening. There was a different kind of engagement.
How would you characterize that engagement?
The engagement was physical in that respect, not always physical, but the more we started using physical metaphors, they started to convey, you don't forget something you experience. And so if you experience a concept, then you can actually continue to mine it. For instance, if I did this silly process story that we did today, I could continue to use that week after week after week as if I were to develop the intricacies of emergence. And so, because you're not going to forget that experience, it's not an idea that you have to remember. It's just you have to refer back to something that you actually felt. So it has a lot of memory attached to it, has a story attached to it, has an event attached to it. So it actually helps you remember specific content that's within it. And if you can't remember the term, then you'll remember the experience. And so if someone gives you the term, oh yes, I remember that. And there's a sense of understanding rather than just I can define that term. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you so much.
You used the word alignment, which is a common word in Nivels. And this morning I wrote a sentence of you. You said, life is about meaning. It's not about information. Can you explain that to me again?
Yes, because that is what humans do. That is, we create meaning. We process information, yes, but we process it in order to create meaning. The brain works with that function as well. We have Fuster from UCLA used to talk about the perception-action cycle. So once we experience something, we immediately begin to question, what did I experience? What does it mean? And then once we create a notion of meaning, we almost always associate it with a narrative, with some storyline in our experience. And then that storyline becomes a concept later on as we understand it in a more rational way. So, but it starts with meaning. I think there are different kinds of meaning. One, there's a felt meaning that is sometimes referred to, we feel it inside our body, like a young child goes, aha! They have a gut feeling. I have a gut feeling. It's felt. You can feel it in different parts of your physiology. And then there's also a technical meaning. Oh, I know what this means in this context. Okay. So alignment in certain contexts with tires, it's a different context and alignment in teaching. And so what does it mean in a technical sense? And then there's also deep meaning, where what you are experiencing and the meaning you have gathered from that actually changes you, actually becomes, I won't say change you in a sense that you're different, it becomes part of you. And so that when understanding and information and meaning become part of you, then it's a deep physical and intellectual and psychological response to the world that we didn't know before. And that's powerful learning. I mean, that becomes our own individual wisdom.
So how do you look at the development right now that computers are, in Holland, the average screen time is 7 hours a day for children, for adults. We look at screens to the world. We are connected through the screen with each other. Maybe we're not connected anymore, you can say. So AI is coming into the schools. AI is about information. AI is smooth. It's not in your body. So how do you look at this development and what can be an answer? How do we deal with this?
I'm not sure how we deal with it, but you're right. It is built around information and information processing. I'd say that if education is only about information processing, then the human element's going to be lost very quickly. Because if humans are just deliverers of information, there will be alternatives to delivering information. There already are. It's been out there a lot already. And AI is just another development in that process. So, but AI can't create the kinds of experiences that shift one's presence in the world. The human element, the human connection, the human relationship. See, the question isn't the information, in my opinion. It isn't that information is bad or at all. It's what is our relationship to and with the information. That becomes the question, the educational question. The information, you can get the information, but what's your relationship with it? How should it be in my repertoire? What do I do with it? What do I feel about it? What values does this information represent? How can I use it in the world? Does it connect me with others? Does it take me away from others? So the relationship to information is the larger question that's educational, that leads us into deep applications or creativity or imagination or redesign. It takes us in all kinds of places. The information takes us nowhere. Nowhere. Except somehow validating to someone that we know the information, that we can remember it at least long enough to answer a test item on it. Once we answer a test item on it, we don't need it anymore if it's not relevant to our lives. As most of you, or as I have, most of the information I've ever learned, I've forgotten. I just dump it because I don't need it. I don't care about it. I have no relationship to it.
So in a way, with the influx of information and the availability, the way we learn to process it, to create meaning from the information that we gather and process, and the way we internalize those meanings and then bring them back into the world becomes more and more important in the way we educate.
That's a beautiful point. I think that's exactly right. From my perspective, when information remains sterile or so temporal, as many of the TikTok things, they're entertaining. I mean, I've scrolled myself. Oh, this is interesting. This is interesting. This is, but it's a form of very temporal entertainment, and I think there's often a sensory overload. If you spend 6 and 7 hours on your devices all of the time, you're just passing the time. You're not relating to anything. So the question is, what enhances our humanity. I really think we still are grappling with what it means to be human. And isn't that what education was always meant to be about, in whatever context? The historical period of the time tried to answer that question, and they've answered it in very different ways. But what does it mean to be human in these times, and how do we be human together? And what is our role, and what's the connection to now not just other humans, but to the natural world? What is our connection to the social institutions we've created that are actually abandoning our well-being, and creating disturbance and violence inside and out?
But then the pedagogical word rejection comes in, or weerstand. What is weerstand?
Resistance.
Resistance comes in. So how do we resist the algorithms which are really addictional? Right? So TikTok, you say it's entertaining. It's not. It's a whole market.
That's true.
2 weeks ago, we had a lecture here, and there was a beautiful sentence from Marshall McLuhan, who wrote a book about media, and he said, first we shape the tool, and then the tool shapes us. When we look at schools, the tool is shaping us in a way. So there's a big discussion, should we allow telephone, should we allow social media? We don't have enough teachers, can maybe AI? So can the computer solve these problems? And there are companies in the world who say, we'll solve every problem there is. So how do we get back to this humanity? Because I feel really at home.
I don't know the answer to that. I wish I did. You're exactly right. It is, and there are addictive qualities to the kinds of media that we have, and it does shape us. It shapes our interest. It shapes our concentration and the time span. And it shapes also the kinds of assumptions we make about life and the world and ourselves. So there's a lot of emptiness in that. I think one way to resist is to bring into question. So what is this actually adding to our humanity? And if we can pose that question continually for ourselves and for others and within our society and with our technology, I think we might have a better handle on what to do with it. AI it's wrong to call it artificial intelligence because it is not intelligent. It's artificial. It is artificial information. So it's not intelligent. It has no wisdom to it. So bringing that into question, why are we calling it artificial intelligence? It is not intelligent. We call it that because that's the way we've defined intelligence, as having a lot of information. So we have to bring that into question. We will never be as intelligent with that assumption as AI. We can't hold or access and recall the information as fast as AI. So people who feel that AI is the answer to everything in terms of information, building it on a false assumption that it's somehow intelligent. It's not intelligent. It's not wise. It has no sense of relationship other than how one bit of information might relate to another bit of information, but not how it relates to us. And I don't know how to turn that conversation around. I wish I did, but to bring it into question is at least one way to disturb, to resist.
What courage does it take for you or all over your career to get there and just to trust on yourself and your inner spirit?
That's a good one. Sometimes I'm not sure I was so wise, but I think in my career I just wanted that what I was researching in terms of what we knew about the neurosciences, about ourselves through the neurosciences, I should say, what we knew about the nature of the universe, that the languaging was so contradictory to our approaches to education. So with a maverick quality to me, I said, let's just see if we can bring together what we do know, using the language of the neurosciences, using the language of complex systems, and see how it relates to what it is we're trying to do and where we might go with this. It seems to be a more consistent frontier to follow. And so what happens is I got ahead of the curve a little bit. I was still trying to figure it out because there were no pathways to follow. But each time was an opportunity to try it out and to work with students who really had more answers than I did, because what they experienced and how well they did and where they took it and how it seemed to change their lives, that is what gave me the confidence. If I didn't have that, I would have stopped. But when you touch someone's life in a positive way, there absolutely nothing that is a better thrill for an educator than that.
Next week, both of you go to the Earth Charter Days. So what is the meaning of Earth Charter for you, and how does it inspire your thinking and your work?
The Earth Charter has really influenced me tremendously. When I first started implementing some of these newer ideas, I realized that there was a sense of holism in what we were about in the learning process and ourselves as human beings. And yet I was still focused on the individual, even though I was doing a lot of work in the social dimensions, the marginalized in our society, and the critiques that needed to be made, but not necessarily knowing where to go with them. I could critique them, but where do we go with this? And I had an opportunity to do a Professors Across Borders program. I went to the University for Peace in Costa Rica, which is a United Nations university, and to study their peace education program, because I wanted to bring this back to my students and incorporate peace education into some of the things they were doing. And I discovered the Earth Charter while I was there. A charter that was a people's treaty that was designed through a multi-year process of inclusion with cultures and nations and peoples. And suddenly I started to see a larger vision of life through championing diversity, through caring for the environment, through addressing social and economic justice issues, and through focusing also on peace and well-being and participation. When I discovered it, it seemed that it had it filled many of the spaces that were opening for me. I tried, first of all, to share the Earth Charter with my students, and I would say, here it is, this is great, and all of this, yeah, you got to read this. And they looked at me like I was just presenting anything else. And then I started looking at, let's just make it a part of our culture. And if I can make caring and social justice a part of our culture, if I can make peace and well-being a part of the culture of this group that I was working with for over 2 years, then let's see, then bring up the explicit kinds of principles and pillars, and let's see if they can take it into their classrooms and use it. And they could, and they were affected, and it gave me hope, and it gave them hope. Not because it was just a nice document, but they saw that they could actually use it and incorporate it in making their lives and their students and their classrooms more humane, more humanity-based. And so I've continued to work with participants, teachers, educators, professors all over the world with the point of what would happen if we started talking about creating an ecological civilization together, using the values that put this in place. People might say, well, we have the Sustainable Development Goals. I teach that. That's fine. That's all I need. But the Sustainable Development Goals need the Earth Charter, because The Sustainable Development Goals start with the premise of the society we currently have. So it doesn't change the worldview. The Earth Charter suggests and invites a different way of thinking about the world, a more interconnected and relational way. The Sustainable Development Goals are goal-oriented, and the Earth Charter is vision-oriented. They're both good. They just need each other. To have goals without visions, you're kind of lost. It has objectives. The SDGs have objectives. The Earth Charter has values. These values are existential commitments. So when you make an existential commitment, then the goals and objectives start to mean something. So on, you start to see the depth of these things. One is multifaceted. The SDGs, they bring in a lot of different things, and one is more holistically integrated. They need each other. They are embedded, qualities are embedded in each other. So holism is not just talking about one thing, another, and that we do in a linear fashion. It's saying that we're made up of these parts of us that aren't really parts. They can't even exist apart from the other. So if we talk about being social, yes, we're social, but we're physical and we're intellectual. Yes, we're intellectual, but we're emotional and we're emotional. So there's no buts in there at all. It's all ands. We're spiritual and we are ecological. So all of these facets of human experience weave themselves together into a different kind of question of who are we and how do we take ourselves and a new vision into the world. So I can't think of anything that's actually more educational than the Earth Charter right now in these times.
If you look at the world in this inherently connected and as a whole system, an open, dynamic system, what are the implications for the way we teach and the way we organize the way we teach?
Well, I spoke this morning of purpose, and I think that's where I'll start with that answer, is the Earth Charter gives us a sense of some semblance of purpose if we want to bring that vision into any kind of reality. The other thing is that to bring it into the classroom, as I mentioned, what tended to be more effective for me is using the values to create my own culture of care, a culture where we appreciate and are enlivened by the joy of living systems and nature, the natural world, and how we relate to it. The way we are with one another in terms of fairness and just relationships, of who has more than they need and who has less than they need. And how can we start to look at the fairness of our social systems and reconstruct ways to look at the resources we're using and the ways we use those resources that are more just, not just to one another, but also to the natural world. And then peace and nonviolence. Nonviolence is, we have a lot of linguistic violence, not just physical violence in the world. So always using it as a mirror, using it as a compass, using it as a point of inquiry. Where do we go with this? Using it as an ethical frame to raise new questions and ask where we're going.
Yeah, so you're creating sort of the lived experience of the purpose of education, of life, of the Earth Charter. And this morning you spoke of the importance of themes to build a curriculum or build learning experiences around. Could you maybe take us into your thinking about the importance of working with themes rather than just working with topics? I think that was the distinction you made this morning.
Yes. So let me just stay with the Earth Charter just a little bit to illustrate that. For example, one of the pillars is respect and care for the diversity of life. So a theme might be not just as a topic, but what does it mean to respect? diversity. One of the principles is to approach others, the diversity of life, with understanding, compassion, and care, and love. And so when we do this, we start to say, what does that really mean? It opens up an inquiry. So it's not an imposed set of moral rules. It is instead statements that allow us to inquire into these aspects of our human experience and what needs to happen in the context of our times. Because learning is contextual. So I would love to have an entire year theme, actually, at a school on diversity and care for the communities of life. Not just human, but more than human as well. What does that even mean? And to have students at all grade levels just investigate this on their own, not as part of their formal curriculum, but in teams as part of a school-wide event. And then to celebrate this, all the information and knowledge and activities that have been gathered throughout the year in a celebration of their learning, bringing in speakers and context and all sorts of community resources to just share and with the world all the things that they've learned. What does ecological integrity mean for the way we relate to the natural world? That's a theme. It's a question. It's a theme surrounded within a question. And so now it gives me an inquiry point. It gives, once again, an entire year of looking into many, many different things. So over a 4-year period, I could go through each of these, and students are in control of their own learning as they guide it along. It takes nothing away from the regular curriculum, and yet the whole school, the whole community, each student is following a learning path of their own. So it's a beautiful way to actually incorporate emergence without having to insist that it find its way inside an already constricted curriculum.
It's experience-based, huh? Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe you're more a space maker than a teacher.
Maybe, yes.
Maybe, yeah. For the time. What kind of sources did inspired you lately, which you want to give to the listeners of the Nivels podcast, so they can go on with your inspirational work?
My reading list and topic list is pretty varied right now. One of the things that is really has captured my interest is that I mentioned a little earlier the perception-action cycle of the brain. We act on that which we perceive. If we cannot perceive wholeness or connections or relationality, we can't act on it. So what helps us learn to perceive more contextually? I've been fascinated with Ian McGilchrist's work on the left and right hemispheres that he's brought together, the intuitive aspects, the wisdom that's found there, the way that it's actually a much broader notion or aspect of the brain, and it helps us contextualize, which is incredibly important in education. And so I've been actually experimenting with peripheral perception. That if I hold out my arms like this and I just look, kind of focus on the periphery as my eyes can do, and walk on the streets or by a stream or anything like that, with this peripheral perception, I found interestingly that I'm not the subject. I'm actually part of a context. And then suddenly I focus on where I'm going, and I'm a subject going in that direction again. So I shift it back. Every time I shift it back, I start to realize that I'm part of a context. So I'm playing with that notion. I don't know how to use it yet, but I'm going to use it some way because it's very, very powerful for me. And I don't know if it will be powerful for others. But McGilchrist's work, David Abrams' work, has been just phenomenal. I'm starting to delve back into Merleau-Ponty with his notion of phenomenology and spaciousness that way. I'm also looking at The Web of Meaning, Jeremy Lent. It's incredible work, and he did an earlier book on patterning. His book is amazing that way. And then, of course, I keep rereading the Earth Charter and seeing what in the world, how can I approach it a little differently.
Thank you so much for today that you worked with the Nivels team, and thanks for this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a real honor. Yeah, I've had fun.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sam.
Deze podcast is er eentje uit de Nivels podcastserie. Stichting Nivels sterkt leraren en schoolleiders bij de uitvoering van hun pedagogische opdracht. We nodigen u graag uit voor een volgend gesprek in deze serie.